welcome to Jumpstart's monthly expert-led webinar series, today with Charesha Barrett on integrating inclusive strategies into your growing business to drive key outcomes. I'm Lauren Smith-Petta, and I serve as Jumpstart's Senior Director of Education. Jumpstart strives to provide you with access to the knowledge and resources you need to make your small business bigger and better. Visit our website to explore some of our other educational opportunities for small businesses and tech companies. Before I introduce our presenter today, a couple of housekeeping items. The presentation session will be 60 to 90 minutes with additional time set aside for Q&A. Our presenter may ask you to participate throughout, so you can place your comments in the chat. You can also raise your hand if you would like to verbalize, and we will unmute you and then remute you once you've finished talking. Please make sure that your responses are going to everyone, not just hosts and panelists. You may need to make this change in the chat. You can also see the Q&A, which is a great place to put sort of random questions as they occur to you, and we'll ensure that we address them at the end in the formal Q&A structure. At the end of today's session and in a follow-up email, you will receive the slides, the recording, any additional relevant resources for the webinar, and a brief survey. We and our facilitators appreciate your feedback. It allows us to continue to bring in experts and entrepreneurs to teach valuable lessons. All right, without further ado, allow me to introduce our presenting subject matter expert today. Charesha Barrett is a dynamic leader, visionary speaker, and founder of CHARP EDucation Consulting, a recognized firm specializing in bridging differences, fostering community engagement, and advancing corporate social responsibility, or CSR. With over 20 years of experience, Barrett is renowned for her ability to help organizations meet their environmental, social, and governance goals through customized programming, strategic partnerships, and transformative training. Barrett's expertise includes public history, cultural competency, civic engagement, and leadership development. She aims to build bridges across diverse communities and foster environments where everyone has equal opportunities to thrive. I've known Charesha for a long time, so I'm glad it is high time she dispenses some wisdom on a Jumpstart forum. Charesha, welcome, and over to you.
Well, welcome, my friends. Welcome to Recalibrating your business and to develop an inclusive strategy. All right, are you able to see the screen with my face on it?
Yes.
Perfect. So as she stated earlier, I've started my education as an educator. I've been in education for over 20 years. Initially, I started as a K through 12 social studies teacher. But then after being a participant of the Institute of Educational Leadership, I decided I wanted to be in a position where I was able to have a macro impact. And I started CHARP EDucation Consulting. And the reason why I started CHARP EDucation Consulting is because I wanted to make positive changes within the education field. In 2016, when I saw how divided our country became, that's when I shifted to DEI. In the last 5 years, I've been doing some shifting too with all the things that have been going on within society. So as we stated earlier, we're coming up ways of how you can align your business goals to your ultimate purpose, how you're going to make your organization be able to compete with other organizations, and how can you fulfill your organizational purpose. So what I would like for people to, I try to be as interactive as possible. What I want you to do is tell me, how would you compare 2025 to 2020? Many of us can tell you what we were doing in 2020. We were at home. We were trying to figure out what was happening. We were trying to figure out if our children are going back to school, if we were going back to work. So in the chat, can you tell me, how do you compare 2020 to 2025? So I would like for you guys to put your comments in the chat. Come on, my friends. Can anyone tell me how you have changed from today versus 5 years ago? How have you shifted your minds? How do you have shifted your businesses? So some of us pretty much made a lot of changes over the years. And we had to make a lot of change because of what was happening politically and all things that were happening throughout our country. And so when we think about that, it's important for us to be able to think about how the past is still informing what's happening today. Wait a minute. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Come on. Give me 1 second. Why are we doing this? I apologize. This is what happens when you're dealing with stuff. Technology. Come on, go to the next page. So we already talked about the trends that are happening. So when we think about DEI, what is DEI? Who can tell me what is DEI? Anybody could put anything about what DEI is? So when we think about DEI, we're thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion. Right now, we see a lot of things happening right now concerning DEI. We think of it as something in which has been the buzzword of today. When we think about diversity, we're thinking about how do we look at people holistically, taking consideration of their whole selves. We're thinking about their race, their ethnicity, their socioeconomic status, their language, their position. How do those factors affect on how they maneuver in today's society? When we think about inclusion, that means making sure that everyone is invited to the party. You can be invited to the party, but you have to be able to participate. You have to be able to dance and enjoy one another. And then when we think about equity, we're thinking about what's fair. How do we remove barriers so everyone will be able to prosper? Give me 1 second, guys. I don't know why this is a little bit stuck. Let me see right here. Okay. Give me one. You guys see my screen or no, Lauren?
Yes.
What do you see where it says the COVID pandemic or no?
Yes.
Okay, let me see why this one's getting a little bit tricky right now. Give me 1 second. Of course, technology is what it does.
Always.
It was working, and then of course, just because we're trying to go to the next page. Okay, let's see here.
Charesha, we do have some thoughts coming through in the chat as well.
Oh, okay, I don't see it. See the chats. Where do we have the thoughts? Oh, diversity, equity, inclusion could be opening the world to different perspectives. It's opening the world, right? Everyone's not, okay. Is anyone else put any of their thoughts about it? So we said Deborah Gibson is doing that.
Earlier in the chat.
Oh, let's go back and see. Hold on 1 second, please. Has significant growth in your company. Good. Anybody else have any other insights on what DEI is? So what I'm going to do, just because technology is what it is, I'm going to unshare and I'm going to share this screen because I'm thinking that that's why this screen's a little bit stuck. All right. I think we're back on track. The other screen was like, I'm going to give you problems, but we're going to try this one now. So we talked about diversity and inclusion. And as we know, we're trying to figure out, is diversity, is it dead? Is DEI dead? I mean, how many of you feel like that you are in a current state where you feel like DEI is dead? Where you think it's outer space, that we're not coming back to it anymore? I think many of us feel that way with all the things that are happening right now, that we feel like it's dead. Now, when we think about DEI, we have to think about what its purpose is, right? Anything that we do as an organization or as an individual, we always try to figure out why do we do the work. And so DEI, it does matter. Although in some cases, organizations are not doing what they were doing before. But we wanted to say that DEI still matter. When we're talking about improvement in business and performance, how much financial gain you can get that you can get as an organization, better decision-making, employee engagement, it fosters a sense of belonging. These are the reasons why DEI matter. So here's some guiding questions. What I wanted to do was break you up into groups, but I would like for you guys to participate. I would like to hear your voices. I would like to know who's in the room, because this will make this a more engaging opportunity if we're having some dialogue with one another. So here are some guiding questions that I want to ask you. If you have been in business for over 5 years, how would you compare your business today with 5 years ago? How has your company pivoted over the years? And the other question is, how are the things that are happening in society affecting your business? So I would like for this to be an open discussion, and I would like for people to participate. So can I get some people to volunteer and to share their thoughts? Or if you want to put it in the chat, but I would like to, get everybody involved as much as possible. Anybody has anything? So you said DI is not dead, but maybe a bit underground or grassroots. Okay, Rita, anyone else have any insight? Okay. Is there anything that people, Lauren had put in there, the trends questionnaire that you can look at a later time. But can anyone else answer these questions? How have you pivoted? What are you doing differently from 5 years ago to today? What are you doing differently? Anybody? Can someone put it in the chat, please? I've been in business less than 5 years. I must say that I spent 2 days debating whether I should show my face on my website because of the changes of DEI. Right. So you're talking about, should you be your authentic self because of the safety issue? Anybody else other than Deborah and Rita want to contribute? What other things do you see happening? So hesitant, right? And I know for me, as a person with a very uncommon name, and I've had to do a lot of shifting over the years because of my name, as your name is part of your personal brand. And I've had to shift because I had to understand that my name is very popular. And I mean by popular, I mean it's unique. So if you type up my name, you're going to find me all the time, which of course can be dangerous with all the things that are happening right now. Does anyone else have anything else to say about this? Okay, some of you are not feeling comfortable sharing your face because of all the things that are happening. Anybody else? What about the global economic, demographic, technological trends that are currently happening locally, nationally, internationally? How are those trends affecting your business? Can anyone give an insight of that? How are those trends affecting your business? Anybody would like to tell me how are those trends affecting your business as an entrepreneur? Okay. We're experiencing problems hiring foreign nationals. Okay, that's interesting, Dennis. Anybody else would like to share out? What are some other trends? So hiring foreign nationals is a problem. Anything else that you see? AI has potential to okay. Because it can level the playing field. Investing more in-person meetings or networking. You have to develop real relationship. People are scared to spend money. Meeting in person helps ease those fear. Okay. So you're investing more time in people. Anything else that you see that are changing? So we know technology. Anything else? Okay, good. Now we talked about the trends that are happening. So we just briefly talked about the trends that are happening in today's society. Here are some more to consider. So as you know, this is an ever-changing world. The world is always changing, either for the good or for the bad. And because the world is changing, we have to make sure that we're mindful of how do we pivot as a business. So by the end of the century, they predict there are going to be 150 to 200 million people in this world. And guess what? We're running out of land. Who would have thought? We're running out of land, which of course you see that is something that is really going on right now in Ukraine. That Ukraine is having constant battles with Russia because of land. And not just the land, but also the resources too. So as you see, the United States, of course, is number one, has the best economy in the world. But guess what? It can change. So they're predicting by 2028 that China is going to be the number one in the world. And with all the things that are happening with tariffs, which of course is affecting us as small businesses, outsourcing, supply chain, all those things such are affecting of how we get money and how we spend money. And as I stated earlier, yes, the Western Hemisphere is on top, but there's a possibility that we can go that we could become second, because if we don't start changing and become innovative, we are going to end up suffering in the long run. So, as I stated earlier, we're all, unfortunately, dealing with political unrest. And we're dealing with political unrest because of all the things that are happening in society. It's hard to separate your work life with your personal life. It's just inevitable, because all those conversations and those things that happen outside are also bleeding into your institutions. So current events, as I stated, are constantly being talked about in the coffee room, near each other's desks, and it's hard to separate those two worlds. And sometimes it's just hard for us to differentiate and figure out the fake news, right? We're trying to figure out what's real, what's not, because all this stuff that's going on right now, it's hard for us to differentiate. I remember, a couple of weeks ago, I was on Instagram, and I was like, oh, I see that monkey riding that tiger. And guess what? It was AI. And then what's happening in the Middle East? A lot of times when we think about the Middle East, we think of it as being far away. But then we have Jewish people, we have Palestinian people that reside in the United States. And although it's over there in the Middle East, it's still also having an impact in us and on us just as well. Immigration. Oh, this has been a very hot topic recently, immigration. We see that immigration is a topic that is not going away. Some people say, okay, we just wanted the criminals to go. But then we're realizing that other people are also caught up in this unfortunate situation. And we also know that the immigrants are doing jobs that we typically don't want to do as Americans. As we already know, the top 1% holds the most power and, of course, holds the most wealth. They represent 44% of our country's wealth. And as you know, in the last year, deregulation has been occurring. And because of deregulation, it's going to have a costly effect on the people who live in low income areas and people who work in certain positions. Now we can think about millionaires and billionaires all the time, but we can think about the billionaires who have a positive impact in society. And the people that I can think about is Dale Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. And although, they have a complicit past, what I can say and what I do is value how they really focus on the importance of giving back to your community. And that's what they've done. That's what they did when they were living. When I think about historical Black college universities, and even thinking about Cleveland, our home, of how they made contributions there. How is your organization going to promote sustainability? How are you going to reuse things that you cannot recycle, such as clothing? How are you going to convert like plastic into baskets? What are you going to do in order to keep our earth safe? Water, even water. When we think about water, only 2.5% of the world's water is fresh water. Only 2.5%, which means although we can say we live in Cleveland and that it's the mistake by the lake, we have access to water that other people don't have. And then when we think about water, 70% of the water is used by agriculture. Pollution. Do you know that 7 million people die per year because of pollution? Marriage. People are not having children and people are not getting married. How is that affecting our country? Or how is this affecting us on the national level, not just national, but also internationally. Generation Z, boy, who could have thought that kids born in 2000 could be 25 years old, but they are. And so when we think about Generation Z, you have 5 generations working simultaneously together. And of course, when you have come from different generations, that means you have different work styles. How are you going to create an environment where you're going to be able to address those differences? And how do you allow your employees to have a voice in the decision making? So we think about entrepreneurship, where you're not just making all the decisions, where you're actually allowing your employees to have a voice on what's going on within your organization. Performance reviews, where you have two-way check-ins, where you have an opportunity to share feedback to your employees, and your employees are able to share feedback with you. And create an environment that is psychologically safe with all the things that are happening right now, especially with mental health. You know, even when things are happening politically, some of us are overwhelmed, and some of us have to turn the news off because of all the things that are happening. We want to make sure we create an environment that we can protect mental health. And with that, that means that we want to prevent suicide, because I know suicide, you know, even the strongest person that you may know can make the wrong decision. And I have experienced that personally. You know, social media. How do you convey your messages? The work that you do on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or X. How do you convey what you do on those platforms? Do you have a podcast? You know, how do you share your voice? And do you have micro learning opportunities where your employees can learn, where it's like 15-minute lessons, webinars? Do you attend LinkedIn Learning? What do you do in order to grow as a person? And what do you do in order to help your employees grow? And as right now, we talk about technology again, think about cybersecurity. How are you going to protect your assets, and how are you going to protect your data? And virtual reality. You know, how can you design products where you can incorporate virtual reality? How can you also use 3D printing in order to create models in order to convey a product with a potential buyer? How can you use drones as a way to monitor your product? Just like, for example, they use drones in order to on farms now. What about robots? You know, a lot of us who watched the Jetsons back in the day, we didn't think that was going to ever be a reality. And how can you use all the technology that is coming about and incorporated in your business? Chat GPT, I use it all the time as a small business. You know, let's work smarter versus harder. Now, only thing I would say about it for as good as providing you data, it helps you with writing letters, help you with writing blogs, but of course, it lacks the empathy as a human. However, a couple months ago, I said, "Hey, ChatGPT, you're doing a great job." She said, "Oh, shucks." So they do have some type of human component, but you really should be mindful and cross-reference your data at all times. How can you use chat boxes in order to communicate? Like you had WebMD, and they can help you diagnose what's wrong with you. How you could use subscription boxes in your business. Now, when we talk about that, this is where we're going to get into the meat of what I wanted to focus on. We talked about trends. Some of you stated some trends that are happening in your business, but we got to talk about the business case. Why do we do this work? Business case is broken up into 3 parts. We have workforce, workplace, and marketplace. And so when we think about workplace, we're thinking about your company's culture and climate, the policies and practices and procedures that you have in place, what type of programming you offer your employees, and how do you reward and recognize your employees. The other thing is we talk about the workforce, the diversity within your workforce. We know that you have 5 generations working together. What type of values do you have in place? What type of generational differences? How are you addressing the generational differences? Some more generations are more tech savvy than others. And how do you create a more welcoming environment for all individuals? Lastly, the marketplace. How do you improve your company's reputation and brand? With all things that are happening, that are changing on the national level, how are you pivoting because of that? What makes your organization competitive? With affirmative action gone, what are you doing differently in order to create an inclusive environment for your employees? So the first thing when we're talking about a business, we have to decide, what's our purpose? Why do you exist? For me, as a small business, my purpose is to use the power of education to transform people's lives. That is my ultimate goal. And so if you can see, there's a purpose wheel framework, and you can see what different organizations, why they exist. If you can think of Harley Davis, to empower growth. If you think of Dove, to instill pride. Visa, to provide security. If you type purpose wheel framework, you'll be able to find that example. So if you don't know your purpose, this is a good reference for you to use. What is the strength of using your purpose? People are going to most likely buy in. People are going to say, hey, I want to be a part of this. They're far more times likely to purchase from your company. They're going to be flexible, and they're going to be loyal to you. And even if you misstep, they're going to be loyal to you, and they're going to trust you. So this is the reason why you should embed purpose in your work. So when you think about your organization, think about, how do you convey your purpose with your colleagues, with the marketplace? How do you convey your purpose? Not just purpose and vision, you also need to know your vision. If you do this work, what do you want to happen? If you do this work, what do you want to happen? You also have the values. What are your beliefs? What are your beliefs, and how do your beliefs affect your decision making? All those things need to be embedded. When you look at people, you only see a fractional part of them. You only see about 10%. When you look at their clothes, the food, the way that they dress, their accent, that's all you know. We as people, we have to dig deep beyond the surface to get to know one another. We all have preferences. We always gravitate toward people that are like us. If you've ever been to a networking event, you always gravitate toward people that look like you. And so that is something by habit, and it's not something to take personal. It's just what we typically do as individuals. And so when we think about the 5 Ps, the very top is performance, right? Performance guides everything. When we think about on an organizational level, we're talking about policies. When we talk about FMLA, in regards to taking off of work, those are policies. When we think about practices, those are things that are signed by the managers. And then when we think about people, we think about what type of climate or culture is within the organization. And then with the very last, when we talk about people, we're talking about the knowledge and skills and attitudes that you must have in order to be competent within your position. So if you don't have those policies put in place, make sure that you have something for succession planning, for hiring and firing, when it comes to dressing, when it comes to learning and development, in regards to terminations, and most importantly, with all the things that are happening right now in regards to protecting people's First Amendment. So I want you to think about, some of you, I talked about numerous trends, and some of you shared those trends. I want you to think about, what are the top 3 trends that you want to focus on? As a business, you need to figure out what's your strengths, what are areas of concerns, which is your weakness, what are opportunities of growth, and what are potential threats. Now, as a diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner, I had to shift. That's why I'm focused on corporate social responsibility. I'm still doing the work, but I'm just doing it in a different way. So as I stated earlier, think about those 3 areas that you want to focus on. What are those 3 areas? Could it be AI, how you can incorporate AI in your work, how you can make sure that you protect your data, How can you give back to your community? Those are some of the trends that as a small business person that I would take in consideration. So what is the problem you want to solve? Think about the symptoms. You know, just like when we have a cold, we always get symptoms. And we always either you got that you have aching body, you might have a headache, you might have a temperature. Those are the symptoms. Think about the symptoms within your organization that's telling you that you have to make a change. Think about the root analysis. Constantly ask, why are these things happening? Why is this happening? You do ask the question, why 5 times to find out the source of the problem. Why are we doing this? You know, think about that should be the overarching question. Why are you doing this work? Is it to be able to get into different brands? Are you able to, if you want to be able to get more customers, why are you doing this work? And so whenever you're doing something, you always focus on the goal. And every goal that you have has to be clear, aspirational, and transformational. You have to have a SMART goal. And when we talk about a SMART goal, we're talking about a SMART goal, but then we're also talking about inclusion and equity. And so specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, inclusive, and equitable. So if we're talking about IE, which is inclusive and equitable, make sure you include people with disabilities, minorities, women, and people are part of the LGBTQI. People are included in your data. So for example, if you look on the bottom, it says increased representation of staff with marginalized identities in our hiring process by December 31st, 2025. That's an example of a SMART goal. Build a volunteer team of 100 door-to-door canvassers by May with at least 10% of people of color. So you see how I'm incorporating DEI in it. Whatever you do, everything should be driven by data. Data, data, data. And we can look at data from a variety of areas. It depends on what your focus area. If we're talking about people and preferences, you can have a DEI inventory to be able to identify people's blind spots. If you're talking about people and their behaviors, you can have a climate survey, or you can do a focus group. If we're talking about management policies and practices, then we can do an audit to see how effective you are in doing your work. Whatever you do, you know, you always have to have your baseline data so you can compare growth over time. You can look at how overarching, when we think about that, we're thinking about performance. How is your organization performing and compared to its competitors? What do you need to change? Just like you saw earlier, we are number one when it comes to our economies, but there is a possibility that that can change if we don't start changing our way of thinking and doing things. So whenever you want to talk about data, it's important for you to have a story. Like the reason why my company is named CHARP EDucation Consulting is to honor my grandparents. My grandmother named me after my grandfather, Charles. So technically my name is Charesha. And so my grandfather always used the word sharp. So I said, oh, the perfect name for my company is SHARP, but just spell it with a CH versus an SH. Whenever you're trying to do a story, it's important for you to have these 3 things: data, narrative, and visuals. You have to include qualitative, quantitative data, and then add context about the data and have your call to action. And you're also going to have to incorporate visuals. What type of charts, tables, pictures you're going to incorporate in your story. So you have to be able to tell us how you are going to explain what is going on in the data, enlighten people with visuals, making a story that's engaging, that's going to captivate people throughout from beginning, middle to end. And then, as you can see, Chip Health of Stanford University says that people retain information when you attach it with a story. So 63% of people recall statistics based on stories and compared to 5%. And stories have the power to transform and inspire and change the trajectory of people's lives. So whenever you create a story, these are the things that you need to consider. What is the population? Who is your target audience? Who is this story intended to? What is the premise? What is the theme, setting? Where does it take place? What are the internal, external factors that are contributing to the story? What information would you need to add to provide more context to the story? When we talk about the people, who are the primary characters in the story? Ensure to include the diverse people in your story. Make sure that you look at the data to justify it. What is the problem? Every story that you read, short or long, always have a conflict. What is the issue, the problem, the conflict? Who are the people involved? When we think of a plot, there's different parts of a plot. The exposition, which is the beginning, which introduces the characters, the setting, and the conflict. The rise, the action, and then you have the climax, which is the highest part of the story. And then you have the fall, the action, which of course is affected by the climax. And then of course you have the end, the resolution, which is sometimes you might have a happy ending, or of course it might end, sometimes the story might end negatively. And then the package, how are you going to package the story? Are you going to share your story using videos, newsletters, press releases, blogs, reports, articles, marketing materials, mass emails, news media, chat, conferences, events, virtual meetings, town halls? How are you going to share your story to the masses? Principles. With any story that you create, you have to figure out what's the thing. What is the moral of the story? How can you incorporate quotes, journals, also surveys, inventories in your stories? And how are you going to make sure that you amplify the voices of people of color, women, and people with disabilities, and also the LGBTQI population? So anything that you do should cause you to act. After sharing your story, what are the next steps you're going to do? You know, are you going to develop a new program on DEI? Are you going to do something for children to fulfill your social enterprise, your corporate social responsibility? Are you going to have small community events? What are you going to do differently in order in reaction to your story? And what are you going to call your employees to do because of the story? So what are your intended outcomes? If you do all these things, what is going to happen? Improvement in job satisfaction, improvement in employee morale, more clients. What do you intend to do because of this work? Now, we're coming to an end a little bit. So without this time, it's important for us to be able to be resilient. You know, we're going through some challenging times, some times that we thought that we would never have to revisit during our lifetime. And so you always have to be prepared for long and short-term goals. You have to be flexible and adaptable. You have to understand that you have to be able to collaborate with others, because as I always stated, I believe in the importance of promoting the diversity of thought. You have to create an atmosphere where people feel trusted, and you have to be transparent. And you just cannot just focus on one stakeholder. You have to focus on all your stakeholders when you're doing this work. So when we think about it, to be authentic in your work, you have to be reliable. You have to respect others. You have to add the human component. You have to be transparent, and you have to take a stance. So these are the people, when I think about who have taken a stance over the time, over throughout their career. Steve Jobs, although he's not with us anymore, and Oprah Winfrey. And you can see how things that happened to them as children, how that affected of how they maneuvered life. But think of these businesses that you interact with. Novo Nordisk, they focus on defeating diabetes. Body Shop is focused on natural ingredients, access to work. Timberland, of course, when we think of opportunities to embrace ourselves with earth, that is something that they focus on. And Dove focus on self-esteem classes. You have Apple that focus on privacy to make sure that apps are not tracking your data. And Adidas is focused on sustainability and making sure that shoes are used, create shoes based on, or shoes are, my fault, to recycle shoes too. So these are things that these organizations are committed to doing. So like I said, what is your organization's purpose and how are you going to give back to your community? These are some of the books that I used for this presentation. One piece of paper, Data-Driven DEI for Randall Pickett. And then 10 Stories That Leaders Tell. And then Business Trends in Practice. So are there any questions? I know I moved quickly, but I think I gave you a lot in the time that we had together. Are there any questions? I see Karen says, what are the creative ways to foster inclusion when many want to continue to work from home? Okay, can you, Karen, can you expound a little bit on that question?
Karen, you're welcome to raise your hand and we can unmute you if you would like to talk, or you can put it in the chat. I think Karen stepped away. Maybe we can come back to her.
Okay, so go ahead.
We have one more question in the chat. Can you please put the book names in the chat?
I sure can. I can sure put them down there for you. This is one of them now, which is Business Trends in Practice. I'll write down, I'm gonna type them right now. And these are great. I'll
put them in the chat, Charesha, if you want.
Okay.
Practice. And what was the other one?
Business Trends in Practice by Bernard Marr. I put his there. And then Data-Driven by Randall Pinkett, Pinkett. And it has one L for Randall. He doesn't have two L's.
Good to know. Great. Thank you so much.
And then this one is where it says the 10 Stories Great Leaders Tell.
Wonderful. Karen did expound a little bit. She said several times a day, for example, when we can interface with each other mid-morning and or mid-afternoon, optional, not required for home workers.
So is that something, is this you're part of an organization? I just wanted to make sure you're, because it's right now, it just depends. I see that on the federal positions, they're really requiring people to go back to work. Okay, let me go back to what she said. When we think about that, it just depends on the organization. It's hard for us as a small business, we have ownership on what's happening within an organization. But if it's an organization where you're working for, it's hard for you as an employee to really impact those changes. I think the biggest thing is productivity. How do you show your employer that you're productive at home? And I think that's the biggest thing right now. Some organizations feel like people they're more productive at work versus at home. And so for me, I think that is part of the question. And I don't know how your organization is set up. I think that's part of it. And I don't know what you do. And so it's hard for me to clearly provide you support with that question. But I think it really just depends on if you can work at home, and if you're able to reach your organizational goals, you should be fine. And find out the flexibility within your organization. I think that's the way that I would respond to that question.
Great. Thank you so much. We have another question in the chat from Deborah. She said, what steps can we take to avoid the appearance of DEI and move toward authentic representation and relationships?
So right now, what I'm doing, corporate social responsibility is still DEI, okay? And so some organizations, if you look at like the 2025, Project 2025, they do mention corporate social responsibility. I think when we talk about DEI, we always focus on the outer versus the inner. So if you really focus on like people with disabilities, if you're focused on socioeconomic status, those things can go. It doesn't regard what race or ethnicity you are, that could be applicable to anybody. So if you can focus on those things that are not visible, those are the things that you should concentrate on. When I say there's, the language you just have to use, eliminate the word diversity, eliminate the word inclusion. Right now, even on my website, I still have diversity, equity, inclusion. And one of my business mentors, he said, just take that stuff away, because you can still do the work. If you're trying to make sure, I think I was having a conversation with someone and they were writing a grant. People living in poverty in Cleveland. Of course, that's going to be typically Black children. If you're talking about people living in a certain part of the country, it's going to be applicable to certain groups. So there's a way that you can meet the needs of the people that you want, but you just have to code it differently. So think about the other social identifiers that you can use other than race and ethnicity. If you talk, let's say, even if you talked about language, if you have first-generation Americans or immigrants, it doesn't matter if they come from Russia, Ukraine, they're going to need additional support. So if you really focus on the social identifiers that is common to everybody, that is the way that you'll be able to do it. Change it, making sure you change your language. Now, I would say ChatGPT is great for that. You can say, ask them, hey, what other word can I use other than diversity, equity, inclusion on my website? Or what's a synonym for this word? Because there's a way that you can continue to do this work. Incorporate ChatGPT. Sometimes I have a brain freeze and I can't remember it. I can't figure out how to solve a certain problem. I say, hey, ChatGPT, I'm going after this grant or I'm going after this proposal. I don't want to use the words diversity, equity, inclusion, but what other words can I use in order for me to meet the goal that I want to?
Thank you, Charesha. She said, thank you very much. I use the word democratize to mean DEI.
And so when we think about, right, which is applicable to everybody, right? Because when we think about a democracy cannot work without the voice of everyone, right? And so if that's the way, and can you tell me, can you expound on what type of context you use it? Because Deborah, I'm just curious on what type of business you have. If you would like to expand, or if you would like to share out. Because I wasn't sure if you were thinking about sharing out.
We can't hear you, Deborah. You might have to put it in the chat. Sorry.
No,
tell me something.
Thank you for being flexible, because technology is what it is. It's dependable and it's not dependable. We just adapt and we move on. But I guess, it depends on your company. As long as you use a language where you're not separating people, I think that is worth the biggest thing. Socioeconomics, language, even immigration could be applicable to any race or ethnicity. So I think just using that language is something the way that you can, okay, yes, I have an interactive media company that allows users to make demographic choices about images and videos they would like to see. Okay. And so how do you incorporate biases because have you ever did the implicit bias test from Harvard? So how do you incorporate biases in your videos? I think that's the question I have. So, okay. So the ultimate goal, I guess what I need to know, the ultimate goal of using this. Okay, good. So what's the ultimate goal of use? Says, I have an interactive media company that allows users to make demographic choices about images and videos. So what's the purpose? So they're making these choices in order to do what? Can you expound a little bit about that, Deborah? Is this for them to find a target audience? Why are they going through the interactive media? Can you expound and tell me why? I'll wait. We can come back to you when you're ready. Are there any other questions? I know I gave you guys a lot. I know I always try to maximize my professional development, because I like to give you something that you can be able to use within your organization. Does anybody else have any questions about the information that I provided you?
Just to build on what Charesha said, in response to your question, Deborah, our chief diversity, equity, inclusion officer, Lamont Mackley, just retired. But one thing he always said that sort of inspired Jumpstarters was DEI has to be within our DNA. And once it is, then that authenticity, I think, can come through. So that always really, I think, got us on the same page. She did elaborate in the chat.
I'm looking at it now. They get to make choices. They allow them to engage with the media. Also, they get to see the media from the perspective of others, because users always go back and view the same video from different perspectives. Okay, so you kind of focus on open-mindedness, make it open-mindedness, meaning thinking about different perspectives. And because I teach a cultural awareness class. And one of the things I really focus on the importance of open-mindedness and be able to listen to people's perspectives concerning different issues. And so ultimately, what I'm gathering or what I'm assuming is that this is also going to have an effect on business choices. And it's also says they get to make choices that allow them to engage with the media. They get to see the media from perspective of others. Okay. And so typically people go to the same video all the time. And then you even trying to find the biases within that is something that you can focus on. But yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I'm just trying to figure out how I can provide you support. Right. You cannot see others until you have walked in their shoes. Right. And that's one thing about cultural awareness. I wonder, do you have case studies? Do you have white papers? Do you incorporate all of that in your work? To tell people this is what people pick this video over that video and why. And even thinking about who are the people participating, it'd be good to capture that data. So you can figure out, is there a certain race or a certain group of people that are gravitating to certain videos? How can you do a white paper on the work that you're currently doing? And you can use that as a way to get other potential clients.
Thank you so much, Charesha, for that very thorough response. She said you answered and she said thank you. Speaking of support, I am going to put Charesha's website in the chat. You can hire her, you can seek her out. You can make sure that DEI is part of your DNA and the lifeblood of your business and the way you do it. We do have time. Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap up here? Okay, I will take that as a no. Charesha, thank you so much. I think our entrepreneurs always appreciate a lot of bang for their buck, and they got 2 hours worth of content in 1 hour. So I don't think anyone's upset about that. So I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming in, talking about this extremely important topic. It's good to see you. Like I said, I put her contact information in the chat. You will all receive the recording via email, the slides via email, and a couple of great handouts that she also made available to you via email in the follow-up. We always have more webinars coming up the third Wednesday of every month. What we have coming up is our September 24th Spanish spoken webinar in honor of National Hispanic Heritage Month, as well as our October 22nd webinar discussing the benefits of Jumpstart's Verizon Community Forward Learning Centers. Charesha mentioned 3D printing and technology and tools and resources, and we'll talk more about that on October 22nd. These details will be published soon at jumpstartinc.org/events. As I said, at the end of today's session and in the follow-up email, you'll receive a brief survey in addition to some of the resources. We appreciate your feedback. It allows us to continue to bring in experts and entrepreneurs like Charesha to teach valuable lessons. Thank you everyone again for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful day.